Yo, what up, and welcome everybody. Welcome back to Pnoid News. Man, listen, I got a good one for y'all today. I decided to make a real video, take it back to the old school, and put some quality on this bitch as far as things is really concerned. And what I was thinking today is that we would discuss the everything bubble and exactly how it's going to pop and kind of how we got here as far as things are really concerned. So let's start with this. In order to understand all this nonsense, you have to understand a couple of concepts. First of all, you have to understand the elephant graph. All right. This is the elephant graph. The elephant graph basically is a breakdown of how income got shared among the world in the past 40 or so years. All right. Now, the next part of this you have to understand is that big hump on the left hand side, that's China and the third world. All right. That's their share of income over the past, 40 years, so you stood here and pulled something like, 2 billion people out of poverty, something along these type of lines. It was shared amongst them. Next, what you have to understand is the dip where the trunk would be. That is the United States worker or the average Western worker, Europe, US, doesn't really matter. Next one you have to understand is the top of the trunk. That's the top 1%. That's their share of income over the past 40 years. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important because you have to understand that inflation is driven by wages. All right. It's a tough concept to understand for a lot of libertarians and a lot of individuals who have been told that inflation is caused by the Fed printing money. But that's really not true, because when the Fed prints money and gives it to the 1% doesn't go buy eggs with it. They don't go buy bread and milk and cheese, right? They don't go buy, washers and dryers or refrigerators. They don't go buy televisions and couches, right? They buy one of those items, or maybe two or three, depending on how many houses they have as far as things are concerned. And in doing so, they don't drive up the inflation, because inflation is caused by demand in the end of the day, right? And if you don't have any wages coming in, you're not going to have any demand. So why don't we have any wages come in? It's the second part you have to understand as far as things are really concerned. Well, in the 1940s, we ended up having a system where we needed to set up a way to keep individuals from becoming communist. And what we did was we set up the Federal Reserve. And that was set up in 1913 to lend money. But we ended up setting it up as a central bank that delved into the economy. And what it did is it had a mandate of chasing full employment. And it did a very good job at this. It was very, very successful at what it needed to do. And it got to the point of where even the most garbage worker in the United States could leave his job Friday morning and have a better paying job by Friday afternoon. That's a bit of an issue. Right. It's a problem of ended up having stagnant growth as far as production is concerned, because workers are continually getting more money. And on top of that, it's having a problem of where inflation ate into investment, because as Americans got more money into their pockets, they ended up buying more goods, cars, houses, things of this nature. Right. But their wages kept up with inflation, because the wages caused the inflation. It's a causal effect. So after that, they had a market-friendly revolution in the 1970s. And by the end of the 1970s, we ended up having, actually in the late 60s, right? And by the late 70s, we ended up having massive amounts of immigration coming in and the offshoring of jobs. Well, what did this mean? Well, we broke the unions and we offshored most of the industrial base to other countries, Mexico, China. They moved from the northern United States to the southern United States, and automation started moving in. And when this happened, it ended up causing United States worker to end up losing the ability to gain any real wage growth. And, the Fed was changed from being full employment to being full employment and price stability. But price stability was number one on its list. So we ended up where the Fed never went out into the market and bought actual commodities, right? So they never went out and bought steel. They never went out and bought aluminum. They never went out and bought, wood. They never went out and bought any of these things that would actually cause inflation for the basic citizen. Now, at the same time, while this is happening, the top 1% are gaining wealth because the bottom part of the, worker scheme weren't. All right. Labor was losing share of the gross national product in the end of the day. Right. You ended up having a boom in the United States over the last 30 years where you had massive amounts of gain inside of the stock markets, the equity markets, the bond markets, and having a huge growth in GDP and a massive amount of growth in production, but not having much wage growth at all, and actually having wage losses in a real term if you mark in inflation for basic goods in real actual growth for the actual citizens. Through this time, the United States workers ended up having the ability to stand here and borrow money at a very, very cheap rate because of the fact that we had a large cadre of individuals who had earned a lot of money over a course of 20 or 30 or 40 years, right, from 1940 to probably about 1980, coming back, after the war, and then, earning the whole way through that period. And they ended up saving a shit ton of money for retirement. So what that was, when they saved all that money for retirement, that meant that credit was super cheap, right? So instead of giving Americans more ability to be able to earn money with their wages, they stood there and gave Americans the ability to borrow money at a very, very cheap rate too. And everybody had this problem. And so we ended up standing here having a few problems with, too much liquidity inside of the market, which caused the dot-com bubble, right? It caused BRIC, it caused Enron, it caused, the housing crisis and things of this nature. And today we're at the same level again. We're calling it the everything bubble, right? Because everything is overpriced at this point. Right. And it's not inflation as a whole. Right. It's inflation in commodities. It's inflation in, housing. It's inflation in cars. It's inflation in medical costs. It's inflation in college. But what you have to understand, all this is driven in the end of the day by the fact that the American worker is not getting his share of the actual domestic product. That's really what this is in the end of the day. The American worker is not gaining his piece of the pie. And that's what it is. Now, how did they stand here and take away the ability of the American worker to be able to do this? Well, they just, offshored his jobs and sent them over to places where people would work for $1 an hour. And they'd put up suicide nets on their buildings if they tried to commit suicide because of the conditions. And also they stood here and opened the floodgates of the rest of the world and told them to bring workers in as much as possible to dilute the labor force. The American workers had an answer for this, which was to stand here and have less kids, right? They said, hey, look, we'll have less children, be able to spend more money, on ourselves and save more and maybe make, a better life for one child instead of 3 or 4, right? Like you have with the baby boomers. Well, that didn't work because they decided just to import all of Central America, the United States, and then Somalia and Libya and everywhere else that they could possibly find cheap labor to come in to continue to do the work on their machines. This needs to stop, by the way. Like, legitimately, this needs to stop. Like, it is what it is. You guys, lefties, if you guys want unions back and you want the ability to control your democracy and things of this nature, legitimately, you need to control your borders. Like, it is what it is. Like, you have to control your borders in the end of the day. All right. So, anyway, right, let's get back into the everything bubble and how it will pop. So, in the year 2022, boomers move into mass retirement as a whole, right? We're past the halfway point in 2022. And what that means is all the cheap money that's inside of the system that's driving up the price of equities and commodities and things of this nature is from the boomers ditching in every dollar they make into their retirement accounts to try and find some yield so that they can stand here and have the opportunity to retire. That's what this is. Right, that and the Fed printing in, $4, $5, $6 trillion in the past year, right, into the money supply. Right, I think they've actually tripled it at this point. But at current, all right, there is $58 trillion in U.S. equities, and right now, $28 trillion is what the American retirement account is. That's more than half, right? So if boomers stand here and pull out their money and decide to retire and live off of some of that money and spend it on, just regular goods and things of this nature, it will pop this bubble. It will collapse the stock market at the end of the day. There's no choice. It's just how math works. Now, the good news is, and the bad news at the same time, you have a problem with the Federal Reserve standing here owning a third of the entire U.S. mortgage market. This is a bit of an issue because basically what they're doing is they're keeping up the price of the mortgage-backed securities, which is, the basic building block that the U.S. Wall Street and, the equities markets is kind of built off of. It's like a giant knot. Everything goes in and nothing comes back out at the end of the day. So all this stuff is tied into securities and equities and all these other, like accounts and things of this nature, but the prices need to go down. But the feds won't let it go down. But it has to come down so that, the American worker has the opportunity to be able to buy up some of this property and, start building a life. This needs to happen in the end of the day. In order for everybody to be able to survive, the one thing that needs to happen inside of the market as a whole is that the feds need to release that, what is it? Something like $2.9, $3.4 trillion in MBS products sitting on their books. They need to liquidate it. And I understand that individuals are still living inside of these houses and they need to be foreclosed on. All right. And that's a lot of people. And I completely understand that that's a terrible thing to say. Right. But at the end of the day, with cheap houses on the market, you'll be able to stand here and snatch up a property for nothing. Right. I'm talking $10,000, $15,000 at that point because of how far the market's going to crash. And right now would be the perfect time to do that because individuals actually have the ability to lay down 20% on a $15,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 house at the moment. Take it and build on it. But right now, as it stands, I don't see the Fed doing that. They should, but I don't see them doing that at the end of the day. But this will crash the market though, here soon. Legitimately. Because what happens when individuals can no longer afford homes and all the money has left the markets and credit lines have dried up? Because that's really what's going to end up happening. The cheap capital that's used to be able to buy homes and fund car sales and all the things of this nature is going to go away. Because when baby boomers pull out their money, there will be no more cheap money for the banks to be able to loan out. It is what it is. You're going to end up seeing a fourfold increase in the amount of cost at minimum of borrowing money. I don't know what's going to happen at that point. So, with that being said, I wanted to bring you this video. Tell me what y'all think in the comment section. Please keep the conspiracy theory stuff the fuck out of it. All right. This is Tom Peace with Pnoid News. Y'all know the deal. Like, share, and subscribe. Peace be like one. Later.